Europe, 1942. The continent burned beneath the iron tread of German armor. Across the plains of Russia, through the deserts of Africa, and along the narrow lanes of France, a single sound came to define fear itself: the thunder of a Panzer engine. The German war machine had mastered something no other army yet understood: speed, precision, and terror. Their armored spearheads struck deep and fast, collapsing nations before they could react. In Warsaw, in Paris, in Kiev, soldiers whispered a name with awe and dread: Panzer. When the Panzer IV rolled into battle, it was the very symbol of Nazi domination. Its gun could tear through Allied armor, its crew trained to fight as if part of one mechanical beast. Allied reports called it efficient, ruthless, unstoppable. It was the perfect weapon for a blitzkrieg world. But perfection never lasts. In the winter of '43, German engineers unveiled something new: the Tiger I, 88 millimeters of death in every shell. Allied tankers who faced it seldom survived to tell the story. From miles away, the Tiger could kill. Its armor, thick as faith, hard as despair. Its silhouette, the stuff of nightmares. In Tunisia, Sherman crews fired and watched their shells bounce off harmlessly. In the east, Soviet T-34s melted under its gun. In the west, Allied commanders began to wonder, was there any machine that could stop it? By 1944, Germany's armored legions stood at their peak. The Panther joined the Tiger, a faster, sleeker predator built for the long retreat that loomed ahead. In the smoldering ruins of Kursk and the hedgerows of Normandy, German tanks bled the enemy for every yard. They were no longer the invincible hunters of '41, but they were still kings of the battlefield. Yet somewhere far across the Atlantic, in the foundries of Detroit and the proving grounds of Aberdeen, a different kind of thunder began to echo. Engineers studied the wrecks of burned Shermans and listened to the stories of crews who had survived the Tigers. They drew blueprints not just for a tank, but for an answer. It was heavy, angular, and powerful. Its gun could match the Tiger. Its armor could finally take a hit and strike back. It would be called the Pershing. But before it reached the front, thousands more Allied soldiers would die inside machines too light for the fight. The Reich's armor still ruled the land, until one day, an American tank rolled onto a European street that would change everything. This is the story of how one U.S. tank outgunned Germany's best armor until the Nazis captured it. Across the Atlantic, America's factories were roaring. Steel, oil, and manpower fused into a single machine of war. Yet, amid the noise of production lines, a quiet argument raged. What kind of tank did America really need? The Sherman had been the workhorse of the Allies, reliable, easy to build, easy to repair. It rolled off assembly lines faster than Germany could destroy them. But for the men inside, it was little comfort. They called it the Ronson, because, like the lighter, it lit every time. In Normandy, Sherman crews faced a nightmare. Their 75 millimeter guns could barely scratch a Panther's armor. And against a Tiger, they had to aim for the rear or pray for luck. Every engagement was a gamble with death. The Americans won with numbers, not with superiority. And those numbers were paid for in lives. In Washington, General Leslie McNair argued that the Sherman was good enough. The Army didn't need a heavy tank, he claimed. It needed mobility, not more armor. But in the field, reports told a different story. Crews were being slaughtered. Commanders demanded something new. That demand reached a young engineer named John T. Madaris, stationed at the Ordnance Department. He studied film reels of Tigers tearing through Allied lines, and he knew America was falling behind. His team began sketching what they called the T-26 project, a tank that could finally stand toe-to-toe with the German monsters. But time was running out. By the time the blueprints were approved, thousands of men had already gone to battle in Shermans that were outmatched from the moment they left the factory. Still, in secret workshops and dusty testing fields, the first prototypes began to take shape. Thick armor, wide tracks, and a massive 90mm gun. They called it the T-26E3. Soon the world would know it by another name, the Pershing. In early 1945, as snow covered the forests of Belgium, a convoy of ships crossed the Atlantic. On their decks sat 20 brand-new Pershings, America's answer to the Tiger. Each tank weighed nearly 46 tons, more than any U.S. vehicle that had rolled before. Inside, crews felt for the first time that they had a fighting chance. The 90mm gun could punch through German armor, and its sloped plating could finally withstand a direct hit. But the Pershing arrived late. The Battle of the Bulge had already raged and ended. Allied forces were pushing toward the Rhine. The war's final act was approaching, and the Pershing would have to prove itself fast or be forgotten as just another prototype. When the tanks rolled off the docks in Antwerp, crews stared at them with awe. They looked unlike anything the U.S. Army had fielded before. Long-barreled, low-slung, deadly. To the men who'd survived in Shermans, it was like stepping into a fortress. By February, Pershings were assigned to the 3rd and 9th Armored Divisions. Their mission was clear: push east, meet the Tiger, and win. Few of the men knew that history was waiting for them on the streets of a bombed-out German city called Cologne. What would happen there would become one of the most iconic tank duels ever captured on film. And for the first time, America's armor would go head-to-head with the beast it had been built to kill. March 6, 1945. The city of Cologne stood in ruins, a skeletal maze of stone and smoke at the edge of the Rhine. German resistance was desperate, cornered, and still deadly. As elements of the 3rd Armored Division rolled into the city, Allied soldiers knew that every street corner could hide a panzer waiting in ambush. The Pershings were about to face their trial by fire. Lieutenant Robert Early commanded one of the brand-new M26 Pershings. His crew had trained for weeks, but none of them had yet seen combat inside their new machine. They nicknamed her Fireball. Moving slowly through the shattered streets, the crew scanned every window, every shadow. The smell of cordite and burning oil filled the air. Civilians hid in cellars, snipers cracked from church towers, and then a thunderclap. A panzer tank opened fire from behind the wreckage of a tram. The shell slammed into Fireball's mantlet, killing the gunner instantly. Early shouted for smoke and reversed, his heart hammering as the tank groaned under the impact. The next shot struck the periscope housing, showering the crew with shards of steel and glass. Somehow, the Pershing survived. The Panther withdrew into an alley, disappearing into the haze. That day, Cologne claimed its first American Pershing, but the lesson was brutal and clear. This was a duel of equals. 2 days later, another Pershing from the same division advanced toward the Cologne Cathedral, its twin spires still standing over the ruins like broken sentinels. Inside the turret, Sergeant Clarence Smoyer steadied his sight. Ahead of him, at the end of a broad street, a German Panther sat waiting. The two tanks stared across the rubble, only a few hundred yards apart. For a moment, the world went silent. Then both guns fired. The Panther's shell missed by inches. Smoyer's round hit squarely beneath the turret ring. Fire erupted. The German crew tried to escape, but the flames swallowed the machine whole. A U.S. Signal Corps cameraman captured the entire duel on black and white film, one of the most iconic sequences of World War II armor combat. The footage spread through Allied newsreels within weeks. For the first time, American audiences saw a Pershing tank destroy a German tank in a fair fight. In that single moment, America's tank reputation changed. No longer the underdog, no longer the mass-produced brawler. The Pershing had arrived, and Germany knew it. But even victory carried a shadow. For every Pershing that reached the front, hundreds of Shermans still fought on, facing Tigers and Panthers without mercy. And in a twist of fate, the Germans would soon capture one of the new American giants, turning its power against the men who built it. The spring of 1945 was unlike any other. Germany was collapsing, cities in ruins, fuel gone, armies retreating on every front. Yet, even in defeat, the Wehrmacht was dangerous. They fought with desperation and cunning, turning every corner of Europe into a trap. In the Rhineland, one American Pershing had pushed too far ahead of its unit. Mud, smoke, and confusion hid the danger. When a bridge ahead collapsed under artillery fire, the tank was stranded behind German lines. The crew tried to destroy their vehicle, but before they could, a German patrol surrounded them. Out of ammunition, and with no escape, they surrendered. For the first time, the Germans had captured America's newest and secret tank. The Pershing was hauled away under cover of darkness, dragged by two half-tracks to an abandoned factory. Engineers from the Waffenamt, Germany's weapons bureau, arrived to inspect it. What they found stunned them. Its armor was thick, its construction solid, and its gun, a 90mm monster, was comparable to their own high-velocity weapons. The Americans, they realized, had finally built a tank that could challenge the Reich's best. One officer reportedly muttered, "If they had fielded this a year earlier, the war might look very different." They examined the periscopes, the radio, the stabilizer system that allowed the Pershing to fire on the move, a technology Germany had never perfected. The report was sent to Berlin that same night. But Berlin could do nothing. The factories were gone, the rail lines shattered, and fuel existed only in dreams. The Pershing, though captured intact, was now a prize without a purpose. In a final act of irony, the Germans tried to use it as a decoy. They parked the Pershing near a crossroads, hoping Allied pilots would mistake it for one of their own. But before the trap could spring, the area came under bombardment. When American forces retook the sector days later, they found the captured Pershing, burned out, riddled with shrapnel, and still standing tall. The Germans had tried to turn it against its creators, and failed. U.S. intelligence officers examined what was left, confirming that the enemy had indeed studied the tank. But it didn't matter now. The war was almost over. Germany's armor legacy had reached its end, and America's had just begun. The Pershing had proven its worth, not by numbers, but by respect. Even the enemy had acknowledged its power. And for the U.S. crews who would later drive tanks in Korea, it was only the beginning. By 1944, The name Tiger carried the weight of fear itself. Wherever the Tiger tank appeared, Allied soldiers whispered its name. Its thick armor shrugged off shells, and its 88mm gun destroyed tanks long before they could return fire. The Tiger was the king of the battlefield, until the king met his match. The Pershing was never meant to fight Tigers head-on. It was born from desperation, a weapon rushed to the front lines when the Sherman could no longer compete. But in the chaos of the Rhineland, destiny arranged a meeting between two legends. February 26, 1945, the city of Cologne. A Tiger tank sat hidden behind the rubble of a bombed-out cathedral, covering the intersection leading to the bridge. Its crew, veterans hardened by years of war, waited silently. They knew retreat was near, but pride kept them there. Down the street came an American column, infantry, jeeps, and one Pershing. Its commander, Lieutenant Robert Early, had orders to clear the road. No one knew a Tiger was waiting. As the Pershing crept forward, the Tiger fired first. A shell screamed past, slamming into a nearby building. The Pershing stopped, turret swinging toward the flash. The gunner, Clarence Sawyer, steadied his aim. Through the gun sight, he saw the Tiger just for a moment. The outline, the turret, the long barrel cutting through the smoke. He fired. The shell struck the Tiger's lower plate, tearing through the armor and setting off ammunition inside. Flames burst from the hatches. Within seconds, the Tiger was silent. The kings of the battlefield had met, and only one walked away. For the Americans on the ground, it was more than a victory. It was vindication. Years of fighting heavier, stronger tanks finally turned around. The footage, captured by U.S. Army cameramen that day, would become one of the most famous combat films of the war. The destroyed Tiger lay smoldering before Cologne Cathedral, its black smoke rising beside the spires that had survived the war's fury. It became a symbol, the end of German armor supremacy. The Pershing didn't win by luck, it won by evolution, by lessons paid for in blood since North Africa. Better optics, better gun, better training. A weapon that represented not just power, but progress. Within weeks, Germany's armored divisions were gone, outnumbered, outgunned, outmaneuvered. And as the Allies crossed the Rhine, the once proud Tiger force disappeared into history. Yet the name endured. In every tank built after, in every battlefield to come, echoes of that duel in Cologne would live on. The Pershing had ended the Tiger's reign and begun America's era of steel. The kings were dead, but a new empire of armor had risen. The guns fell silent in May 1945. The once mighty Third Reich lay in ruins. Its cities reduced to ashes, its armies scattered, its tanks rusting in the mud of Europe. The Tiger, the Panther, the machine that once terrified the world, now stood as broken monuments to a lost empire. But the lessons they taught were not forgotten. The Allies had seen what armored warfare could become. And America had learned that power alone was never enough. It needed innovation. Out of that realization came a new doctrine. No longer would American tanks fight just with numbers, but with technology, fire control, optics, and mobility. The Pershing, born too late to change the course of the war, became the foundation of a new generation. The M46 Patton followed, then the M47, M48, and M60. Each one carried within it the echoes of that battle in Cologne. Steel evolved, but the idea remained: to strike fast, hit hard, and survive. As the Cold War dawned, American tanks faced a new threat: the Soviet T-54 and T-62, machines born from the same deadly lessons of the Second World War. Across the plains of Korea, the Pershing returned to war. There, against North Korean T-34s, it proved its worth again, an equal among the world's best. The Tiger's name faded into memory, surviving only in museums and grainy combat reels. But for the men who fought it, it never truly died. Its legend became the measure of all tanks to come. The Pershing's success wasn't in the number built, but in what it represented. The moment America stopped reacting and started leading. In every modern tank that came after, from the Patton to the M1 Abrams, there is a trace of the Pershing, its lessons, its silhouette, its spirit. And for the world that followed, that single duel in Cologne remained a symbol of change, a moment when the myth of German invincibility ended and a new era of American steel began. The war had forged heroes, monsters, and machines, but it also forged something greater: the understanding that the will to adapt was the greatest weapon of all. This was how one U.S. tank outgunned Germany's best armor, until they captured one